Oh, greetings, everyone. It is Monday night, and welcome to another edition of To an Imperfect Union. Tonight, we'll be talking with Mr. Mark Jetson. If you recall, Mark ran for office, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that have happened in the election, as well as uh, his perspectives as an accountant during this pandemic. We'll also be have Miss Debbie Kirkwood on, a local San Diegan, as well as Mr. Clarence Powers. He will be on later, just before our Black Panther segment. So let's sit back and enjoy the show, and let's welcome Mark to the program. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
Good. How are you doing? Can you hear my audio?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Outstanding. And I don't see myself on the camera, so I don't know if that's intended or not.
Well, that's purely up to you. But I don't know. Maybe it's your phone camera, or we just don't have a good connection right now. But how have you been?
Good. How about yourself?
Well, I'm still above ground, so I'm doing well. Unfortunately, my Steelers didn't come through for me this year, but hey, there's always next year. There you are, Mark. There we go. Now we have a picture of you up there. There
Yeah,
you go.
the picture. The cam didn't seem to be working, but right.
So, um, uh, let's talk a little bit about the political climate of North Carolina.
Let's do that.
Of course, you had one of your representatives stood against this election, calling it false. Um, and we had a lot of rhetoric that led to the events that we saw in the Capitol.
Yes, sir.
Also, we saw some of the people that were on video were, of course, from North Carolina as well as some other states.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I talked about this with Luke Boehm, and the thing that the two of you have in common is that both of you ran for office, you in the state of North Carolina and him in the state of Indiana. But the politics seemed almost the very same, especially when you come to the rural areas and the right-wing rhetoric and whatnot. What's your take on that?
Well, the states are very similar to each other. Both have a red core. There's the urban populations, like in North Carolina here, Raleigh and Charlotte, that are, of course, big blue dots. We almost turned blue. So we have the big blue areas, but if you look at most of the landscape, it's mostly red. A lot of rural farming counties, and so yeah, it's very similar to Indiana in those regards.
Did you? One of the things that he was talking about was about a lot of his opposition, being as how he was a Democrat. Came from some of those red counties that you were talking about, when you say they're similar. Do you think that the presence of someone like Trump, do you think that these organizations will eventually go back underground like they did before Trump, or do you think that this message, now that they've seen the insurrection in the Capitol and very little consequence as far as federal charges? I mean, I would think if you have an officer laying in the rotunda, that somehow there would be federal murder charges brought against someone. But so far, that hasn't happened. But but can you kind of talk about the influence of these? And like I said, whether or not you think they're going to go underground, or do you think that they're here to stay?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what Biden is going to do. President Biden's going to do. If he takes what I hope he will not do is say, all right, I know he's talking a good unity game, and that's awesome for a president. But at the end of the day, laws have been broken, and we are either a nation that follows the rule of law, or we are not a nation that follows the rule of law. And I think that as Americans, we all want to follow the rule of law, and that means that we have to prosecute crimes without preference and without passion. If somebody broke the law, and so many of them did, then those all need to be prosecuted. The shame would be if President Biden took a reconciliatory tone and let crimes just go, right? And hoping everything is going to smooth out and everybody's going to be friends and we can sing Kumbaya together. Because that's just not going to happen. That would be the worst case scenario. Conversely, if he turns around, his DOJ turns around and prosecutes everybody that should be prosecuted in fairly terse terms, then we may see it climb back underground. But if President Biden even gives it a moment to fester, it will. Now, to be fair to President Biden, I know we haven't seen anything yet, but he's only been there for 2 weeks. Right, he's still got to get, he's still getting his feet on the ground. I wouldn't expect any serious charges related to the insurrection to be coming out for a few months, anyways. And the higher ups, members of Congress, if they are going to prosecute Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz, right, the lot, they get one chance at doing that, and they've got to get it right. And I imagine it's going to take some time to line up, and we're not going to hear about it until it happens. So I'm kind of living on faith right now that is in fact the plan that he's following.
Well, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see what stance he takes, especially with this, like you said, the Department of Justice. And I'm kind of waiting to see what they do about the Merrick Garland nomination, especially when McConnell was so adamant about making sure that he was not a Supreme Court judge. Do you think that there'll be any repercussions from this? For example, maybe a slowing down of the nomination process, or possibly even making it part of one of the pawns in the scheme for so-called unity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, make no mistake, right? The Republicans have been working towards basically a government coup since 1995. Is, in my opinion, when Newt Gingrich took over the House as Speaker, is when the Republicans put party over country and never looked back. And they've been working on that slowly ever since, right? They've been stacking the federal courts, which is what you need to do. They obstructed Obama. They didn't do anything when George Bush literally, started a war with fabricated evidence. They did nothing. And then Donald Trump stole the election. Now, that wasn't their plan, right? But that's what happened. And they found out that, having Trump in there was beautiful, because he would sign literally anything they put on his desk, regardless of how ridiculous or criminal it was. And he'd just go ahead and sign it. So he was a wild card for them, and he kind of took them off the plan. But now that he's gone, they're back on their plan to overthrow the government. They do not want a democracy. That's why they work so hard at voter suppression. And if you're going to overthrow the government in a banana republic, you need to have the army on your side, right? Because then you can do anything you want. You've got all the guns. In a country like the U.S., if you want to overthrow the government, where the army is going to be neutral, you need to stack the federal courts. And that's what they've been doing. We saw they stacked the federal court, the Supreme Court, throughout the Bushes, right? And that got us Citizens United, and that got us DC v. Heller. where they basically, wiped out half of the Second Amendment. And so now they're in the process of taking over America via the courts, and they'll play the game, because they know all they have to do is lie low. We had a huge blue wave right after Reagan and Bush, and that got us Clinton. And then 2 years later, the Republicans took one of the houses, and then we had a big blue wave for Obama. And then 2 years later, the Republicans took one or both of the houses. And then, 2022, they're going to wait it out. And if history repeats, they'll take one or both of the houses, and then they'll start the obstruction all over again. And in 2028, they'll have all three. And so that's when they will get rid of Social Security and Medicare, and they will finish stacking the courts. And so anyways, so they're going to play the game and bide their time, because that's always been part of the plan.
Well, you just set the foundation for me to have you back on the show, because I'm sure sometime before this Biden administration is over, we're going to talk about court packing and things of that nature.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure this is an inevitable conversation after the pandemic. But I want to talk to you now as an accountant.
Yes,
because we've seen a lot of, especially out here in California. So, I mean, it might not be as bad as North Carolina, but everyone knows the situation out here in California as far as small businesses, outdoor dining, the restaurant business and hospitality business, such as hotels and whatnot, are going to take it's going to take an immense toll on our economy. But North Carolina also has somewhat of a tourist industry, and I'm also thinking of what is the effect that this is going to have on the economy. Are you worried about the effects of the pandemic on the future of small businesses?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, small businesses have been hammered. It's been tougher for me to see here on the ground in North Carolina for a couple of reasons. One, I've basically been in a bunker for 9 months, or wow, almost 11 months now, like everybody else. And I've talked to some of my business clients, and they're not happy, but I'm not sure they've let on exactly how bad it is. And so I'll see the business tax returns start to roll in over the next several weeks, but I haven't seen much of it yet. I know the PPP did help some of my clients. It was a lifesaver, but that was only once, and it only stretches so far. And of course, we know that the Republicans passed the PPP not to help the small businesses, but so they could push it all to their wealthy donors and get the kickbacks into the reelection coffers. Same thing, different decade. So I really haven't seen all of the damage of it yet, but I know it's devastating. If you look at the national stats, the Small Business Administration has been talking a lot about it. There was a survey from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and MetLife did a poll that showed they said 74% of business owners said they're not going to make it through this year unless there's another huge bailout. They're just dying, So yeah, it's been bad, and unfortunately, we didn't have a government that cared about small businesses. We had what we needed were intelligent, educated problem solvers who had the best interests of the 99% in their minds. And what we had were Republicans. So, there you go. There you go.
I want to talk about a couple of the executive orders that would probably have a direct effect on your district and the politics of your district. And the first one I want to talk about is immigration.
Yes.
We've heard a lot about jobs being lost and jobs that won't come back, but I'm also thinking that some of the lower paying jobs, and this is one thing that that affected some of one industry that was prevalent somewhat in North Carolina, and I'm talking about the fishing and shrimp industry.
Mhm.
And we saw how, excuse me, we saw how during the first of this pandemic, we were having trouble getting workers because these were the only people that would take the jobs.
Right.
Now, you have a president that says he wants, to make it possible for us to have these undocumented workers, but yet provide them with a way of citizenship. Uh, how is that being taken in the state of North Carolina?
So in the state of North Carolina, from the people I've spoken with, it's going to be right along party lines. Those of us on the left know that we're a nation of immigrants. We are proud of the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. We know that it makes us stronger and not weaker, right? And then you have the people on the right that just have this irrational fear that, for whatever reason, Trump stirred up with the whole border wall thing, and they're coming for your suburbs, and yada yada yada, all this. So it's gonna be straight along party lines. Like, there's not much healing has occurred since Trump has left, and until we do something about the propaganda problem, not much healing is going to occur. So yeah, I guess that's how I'd put it.
And the 100-day mask mandate. We know, some people still consider this as, you know, uh, stamping on their rights, there's a lot of there was a lot of pushback, but he brought out his executive order, and of course, this only applies on federal uh, land and federal institutions. Um, how is that being taken by the state? A state that I believe you had a governor that didn't mandate masks at first.
Well, our governor has a problem because our governor is a Democrat, but the legislature is very red. And so he's got a hard time walking the line. I think what he'd like to do is just, straight up lock everybody down, do the total mask mandate, like the common sense right thing to do. And what we had done, if we had done this, 12 months ago, then our economies wouldn't have shut down completely. But the problem is that he's getting so much pushback from the legislature that he's gotta give a little bit. And so, yeah, I think we're at level 3 right now. And so it's not everybody can go out and just be maskless. There's restrictions on how long people can stay out and drink, blah, blah, blah. But in North Carolina, because of Donald Trump directly, we have so many MAGA that just refuse to wear masks because Trump turned a global pandemic into a political issue. It's the silliest thing ever. And, we've 600,000 people are projected to be dead by the end of next month because of it. I mean, South Korea has lost less than 1,000 people, right? We both had the same case on the same day, which was January 19th of 2020. And South Korea immediately went into lockdown, started doing roadside testing, quarantining the people they found, and they have less than 1,000 dead. Now, yeah, they're smaller than us, but they're 1/6 our size. So let's extrapolate that, right? So they have 500 dead. We should have 3,000 dead if we had done the same thing. And you know what? If the Electoral College, the abomination to democracy that is, had been done away with before, then Hillary Clinton would have been president, and we would have had 10,000 dead. We would have had some problems, but the national pandemic team would have been shut down, blah blah blah. So because of Trump, the way he positioned this, we now have hundreds of thousands of dead. And in North Carolina, you see people walking around without masks all the time, and the police aren't going to do anything about it. Personally, I think they're committing crimes myself, but yeah.
Well, I've openly called Trump a murderer, which has gotten me in trouble on some social media platforms because I think he's responsible for these deaths
Yep.
after calling it a hoax.
Yep.
But let's talk about vaccines. We seem to have a number out here in California. We have at least two vaccines. I know Moderna and Pfizer,
Mhm.
but now we've talked about stockpiles of vaccines that don't exist.
Yeah.
People that are waiting in line. I know out here in California they have a 75 year old cutoff as far as who gets the shot first. Health workers have gotten the shot, but what do you find that there's the same bottleneck in North Carolina, and what do you attribute? Do you attribute that to people that are leery to take the vaccine, or do you think that people are still under the Trump spell of, this will go away?
No, no. I think the reason we're having problems getting the vaccine is because, as the Biden administration said, it was all just another grift, another lie. There was no vaccination distribution plan, right? Or there was a empty shell of one. And so now we're to the point where Biden's trying to get up and running, and we will get production up, and we will get the vaccine out. But Trump never had a plan to do it. And if there was a plan to do it, they were waiting to figure out how they and all their buddies could make money off of it, regardless of how many Americans died. That's all they want to do is grift out the money on it. So Biden will get it out, but we do still have the problem then. If once you get the vaccine out, you're going to have people that, oh no, I'm not going to take that. It's all a hoax, blah, blah, blah. There's where was it? I think Dodger Stadium yesterday. Am I remembering that correctly? There was a whole bunch of people that were going to do vaccinations there, and a whole bunch of anti-vaxxers showed up, preaching the old MAGA lies, 99.8 survivability rate and all that. And they should have arrested every single one of those people for reckless endangerment. But so that's the problem we have MAGA, right? I mean, MAGA is the problem we have. MAGA's our problem. If it wasn't for MAGA, we would have, well, if it wasn't for conservative voters, but now specifically MAGA, right? If every one of them magically disappeared today, in 10 years, the U.S. would have the best education system in the world. We'd have the best, most affordable healthcare in the world. We'd have the richest middle class, biggest middle class. The only reason we don't have that is because of Republican voters. Period. They're the problem. So.
Well, I've seen the disappearance of the middle class since the mid 1990s, but that's another conversation for a different day. Do you think that Trump is still in charge of the Republican Party?
Yes, 100%, 100%, and and it shows because they're giving like Marjorie Taylor Greene, right, committee assignments and not putting her in handcuffs. The fear of some on the left is that he's actually running, will be running a shadow government out of Mar-a-Lago as he shuffles, red state governors in and out, and they're basically running his plan and, now what they should be doing. And of course, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I think right now we're still under the influence of Trump. He's a dangerous person. He needs to be prosecuted. I think we should send him and his entire administration, every player, to the Hague for crimes against humanity, both for what they did on the southern border and in their blatant treatment of COVID. So, the thing that came out of the Kushner camp last year was that they intentionally let COVID spread. They chose not to have a national plan because, as they phrased it, it was not politically prudent. And what that meant is that when they decided to do that, it was killing mostly minority voters in New York and New Jersey, people who would vote against Trump. And so they figured, you know what, it's going to kill mostly Democratic voters. Let's just let it go. And in early February, the Woodward tapes, right? Don't know if you heard those, but Trump is on tape with Mr. Woodward saying that, oh, I know this is far worse than the flu.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Exact phrase. We're not talking 1% fatality. We're talking 5% fatality. He said that in the first week of February, and 3 weeks later called it a Democratic hoax at a rally in Florida. That to me demonstrates premeditation. If you or I had done that, James, man, we'd be in prison forever, right? So they just need to charge him with crimes against humanity, and we need to do that. Him, his entire administration, every GOP enabler in Congress, they all need to go, and we need to do that for two reasons. One is justice, and the other is to do that in the world court instead of our own courts. I think hopefully would bring some faith of other countries, back into our fold, that we're trying to re-enter the international society after being one of the greatest threats on the planet for 4 years. So,
well, we had a special the other night on QAnon, and although I thought that I knew quite a bit about this after the Pizzagate fiasco,
right.
Children being held in the basement in a building that has no basement.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But and then I look at, all of a sudden, we don't have one QAnon supporter in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
We have 3 or 4
that we know about.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how do you put people like this in charge or even on committees? You have a Marjorie Taylor Greene that has said that the Parkland shooting was a hoax.
Yep.
She wears a mask that says Trump won.
Yep.
And she's a part of the education committee.
Right.
Is this, what did they used to call, are we being punked?
That's what I thought in February of 2017. That was the question I asked. No, but the problem is that, I think there's a couple of problems. One, if I'm pulling back and looking at this objectively, and I always try to, that these are the people they have. They've got to put them on some committee somewhere, right? This is what the Republicans have. This is what was sent to Washington. But on a larger note, this is the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not some 2% fringe of the Republican Party anymore. She's part of the 30% of the Republican Party. Those guys are mainstream. So this is what McCarthy and McConnell have to work with. This is the new Republican Party. They're dumb, they're lazy, they're uneducated, they won't read a book to save their lives, but by God, they're going to point a gun at you because they think you're, in a Hollywood cabal eating babies or something. This is the Republican Party. It's a threat to national security.
When you look at, I'm looking back at some of the people that have been censured by Congress or had to resign. Al Franken kind of comes to mind right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then, you also have to include Peter King. And Peter King was during the Trump administration. If the Republican Party was not able to tolerate Peter King, what is this all about?
Yeah. I've got some thoughts on that I'm going to leave alone for right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like I say, this is what they have to work with. And so they're trying to get their arms around, all right, this is the new base, but hey, look, they don't have the same problems we have. These people will go out and vote for anybody you tell them to vote for, right? And they will vote every single time, regardless of how crazy and how stupid what they want to do is. These people will go out and vote for it. They don't understand that they just committed sedition against the government of America, either directly or they aided and abetted it. And, you and I know, because we're military, and there's a lot of military in there, that sedition is one of the few crimes for which you can lose your military pension. You can lose your pension for sedition, insurrection, treason, and these guys are out there doing it, and they are so brainwashed that they think they're actually patriots. Like they literally don't get that, and that's a huge problem. This is a huge problem. Right now, I'm having a hard time, unless Biden does the right things and throws some knockout punches. I just don't see this. I don't see how this doesn't end with a tremendous amount of bloodshed. If we ignore this problem, hoping it's going to go away, it's not gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be pretty.
Well, sadly, I have to say that on some aspects of that, I'm very fearful myself.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, at any other time in our history, this would be called just what it is, like you say, an insurrection. This is sedition,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering. And I'm going to ask you this as a way of parting. Um, One of the things that really bother me, and the reason I'm asking you this is because you mentioned the fact of military and the way So I'm going to go to our military training.
Okay.
Um, when you look at the way people of color are treated,
Mhm.
and you look, and it seems to be a fear of black and brown people,
Mhm.
just like you have in most cases a fear of the dark when
Mhm.
you're a child,
Right. An irrational fear.
right? But when you become military,
Mhm.
you're taught to embrace the darkness. This is what you use. A lot of things happen under the cover of darkness.
Mhm.
How do you? I mean, do you think that there's a crossover somewhere, or that there has to be a crossover when people have to be trained to embrace the darkness, but yet and still be fearful of dark-colored people in public?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess if I could summarize the question, it's what is driving this divisiveness racially in our society, and what can we do to fix it? Is that a good summation, James?
Yes, that
Yeah.
would be good.
Yeah. So for me, I think it all comes back to education. The cure for xenophobia, fear of foreign peoples, is travel. If you travel internationally, you're just not going to have a lot of xenophobia. If you're afraid of people of different skin colors, if you spend time around them, that fear is going to go away. You see that the more diversity you get, the more you realize that people are people are people, and there's good people and there's bad people of every race, color, creed, blah 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 blah. So it's a question of we have to give enough education and enough experience to people when they're young. I mean, I would love to say that a graduation requirement for high schoolers would be to spend 2 months overseas somewhere in a different foreign culture. I like that. I think would do us a world of good, and obviously a whole bunch of education around diversity training, etc. And as much as we can integrate, because that experience and that knowledge is what's going to kill that irrational fear. Because it's just like you said, when you're a kid and you're afraid of the dark, right? And when you have enough knowledge and experience, there's nothing in the dark that isn't there in the light, and so those irrational fears goes away, and education is the key to all of that, sir. That's what it is.
Well, as always, Mark, it's very good to have you on the show. As you know, I tried to get you on many times,
Yes,
and
sir.
I appreciate your thoughts and your approach to modern politics, even from the state of North Carolina.
Yes,
That's
sir.
all it is. uh, uh, yeah, I spent time in your state, thanks to Fort Bragg and
Yes, sir.
Fayetteville and
Yeah.
different places like that.
Yes, sir.
But why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening, and we'll let you go.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me on, James. Always a pleasure, sir. So once again, I'm running for North Carolina's District 7 U.S. House of Representatives in 2022, and I'll be publishing a book due out Q2 of this year. Call it May, maybe even beginning of June. And so please be looking out for that. And I hope to be back on here, James. And thank you again for having me on, sir.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yes,
You have
sir.
a great you have a great week.
Yes, sir. You as well. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. I'm going. Mrs. Kirkwood couldn't be here, so I'm going to actually see if
Oh, okay. Can't hear you. Hang on. Let's see what's up. Okay, James, I can't hear you or see you.
are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Seems like I had lost you there for a minute, but good evening, and it's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Good evening, James.
Um, I called you on a little earlier. I have a lady that I had come on, Miss Debbie Kirkwood, but she's feeling a little ill, and I'm going to bring on Miss Mashburn in her place. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the last question that I had asked Mr. Judson, and that's on the fear of black and brown people on one end, and on our end, the fear of it being experimented on, you know, because of the past
Mhm.
history. What do you
Right.
what's your thoughts on that? You know, on the acceptance of the vaccine within the black community, the effect of what has happened in the nation's capital when you look at how Black Lives Matter was handled, and you look at how the insurrection was handled, which is where I get the innate fear of black and brown people. You know, you need laws and violence to you know, make sure that we are in our place, but yet and still you have a certain amount of tolerance toward white indignation.
Yeah. I guess competency would definitely come into my mind. As Mark set forth, education is pretty much one of the principles that a foundation has to have. You have to be competent. Um, I believe that the black community, or I should say, the brown community, the copper colored community, have a valid justification for not allowing the government to call the shots when it comes to their participation in any type of trial of a vaccine or medical experimentation on human life. Um, but we're getting this from private industry. We're not getting this from the government. The government isn't really the pillar behind the push to try and vaccinate over 50% of the United States population. They're going for gold. They want to do at least 90% of the United States population. And I've even heard my governor here in New York said, if we have to have an army to make that happen, we're going to do it. So I'm kind of skeptical on positioning in the environment that would uproot me from participating in a forceful um, put me in a dilemma that would make me choose life over experimentation. I just don't find that appealing. Their positioning toward the public. As far as the um, black and brown people, the um, definition of white is pure, black is the devil. However, they want to choose that categorization. It wasn't. It was imposed upon us. Right. It wasn't something that we volunteered for, and my speaking is coming from the experience of my family, which is that of the Trail of Tears. You driven up from Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, having to deal with the immigration that we call the nationalization of citizens upon us. So when I see something like what happened on 1/6, um, I think that 84 million people have forgotten where they live. They they have this notion of patriotism. However, they're the immigrant, however born here. But if we were to go back, someone allowed them the opportunity to participate upon the earth in this area of the globe and share the earth's produce, whether it was technology or whether it was food sources. It was given to someone who did not have. And I think through again, the education of capitalism, man has considered the foundation economy to be that of capitalism. So patriotism and capitalism seems to go hand in hand. And when you start messing with the capitalism, then let's become patriots so that we can get our capital back. And the capital back in that day was, of course, man. It was slaves. It was people who didn't look like them. And I think we have to come back to the rule of law to get us back on track. And we have to have people who are competent to be able to lay down a foundation, well, it has to be jurisdictional, but to lay down that foundation so that we can come back round to the reality that we're not secret societies.
Well,
we're not foreign property.
Let's kind of leave that thought right there, Brother Powers, because I want to get Miss Mashburn on. She came in response to Miss Kirkwood not feeling ill. So let's welcome Miss Mashburn to the program for the very first time. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening? I hope you don't mind if I call you Jennifer.
Oh, no, not at all. Hi. Kind of a surprise.
Yeah, I had heard about you from Miss Kirkwood, and so you do come with great credentials there. So welcome you to the Another Imperfect Union, and I guess we could start out by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a single mother. I'm a teacher who no longer works in the classroom, but I currently tutor students. I used to be a Republican and have become a Democrat in this last presidency that we just left, thankfully. I don't know what all you want to know, but
well, let's start with teaching. How long had you been a teacher, and was it the pandemic that made you make the changes in your teaching career?
Okay, I've been teaching since 2003. And no, I actually had become a tutor prior to the pandemic, and I had an office for 4 years in a neighboring town that I did have to shut down because of the pandemic. There was no ventilation in my office, and it was not conducive to a pandemic. So I moved everything home, and I'm now working from home.
Okay. So do you live here in California, or are you native to the area, San Diego area, or?
Yes, I'm in San Diego County. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do you think about President Biden's plan to have kids back in school within the first 100 days? Do you think that this is something that's viable, or do you think that this is a plan that's admirable?
I think it's admirable for. I think it's aggressive, and honestly, when we talk about getting schools back open again, well, I don't like to even say that they're closed because because there's still teaching and learning going on, just in a different way. But I'm very protective of the teachers. I myself have an underlying health condition, and as does my son. And I think if people want schools open, and we all do, and we do want, students back in the classroom, I think we need to get teachers vaccinated so they and their families are safe. I've heard stories of teachers falling ill. I have friends who are teachers who fell ill because they were on the workplace and got it from work. And I know families I work with now whose, child went to school, brought it home to the parents. The parents got very ill with it. So I don't know. I want the teachers and their families and the students' families. A lot of students live in multi-generational families, and I just want everyone to be safe. It's like children don't live in a bubble. We all want children to be at school where they can be social with their friends and things, but at the same time, adults take care of them, and those adults and those other adults that they live with may be at higher risk to more severe illness.
The teachers union in Chicago has taken a very hard stance on this. What do you think? Is this the same stance that teachers should take here in California, considering our numbers?
I agree with that stance. I really do. I really think it's, as sad as it is for a time that students have to be at home learning from home. And I know there have been, sadly suicides and things that, because it's just hard for some students. I think that, I have friends whose administrator has told them, you either come back to work on site or talk to HR and about leaving this school and finding someplace else for you. And so, teachers aren't paid enough to be putting their lives on the line unnecessarily like this. I've worked for an online school. It's not a brick and mortar school. This is all they do. They teach kids all over the world. It's very effective. It's something that they've been doing for a long time. My own son took a course from them and did very well in it and learned a lot. I just, people are juggling a lot right now, including teachers. And, I don't know. I do side with the way that the union is taking a firm stance in Chicago. And that's probably going to be quite unpopular with the parents who are listening. But that's from the teacher's perspective and caring for families. I think that's important.
I 100% agree with you, but I also think that this is going to have a very adverse effect on minority children. When you consider, the current climate of charter schools and the different legislation that we are seeing on the ballots, what's your take on that?
It's tough. This is a problem that's larger than me, and it takes a lot more knowledge than what I have. But the whole idea that schools only get the funding for the neighborhood that they're in, and the disservice that it does to students of color, families of color. A pandemic happens, and all of a sudden, utility companies get together and they start providing technology for students at home. Well, where were they before the pandemic? Why didn't that happen before the pandemic? I think you're right. I think socioeconomically, we have to take a look at it. We have to find ways to make it work. And, it's hard when we don't have time to plan. We're in the midst of it now. But that is tough. And I don't know what the answers are.
Well, not only do we have a pandemic, we've had hurricanes, we've had fires, we've had different things that have impact on migrant workers, their children. Some of the neighborhoods that don't get the tax dollars, so everyone doesn't have access to a computer or a laptop. I think that's something also that we have to look into in a country that is supposedly blessed with so much technology. But I want to move on a little bit here, and I also would like to talk about the controversy surrounding Governor Newsom. How do you feel the way he has handled the pandemic?
I'm quite proud of the way he's handled it. I was happy to be living in California when we were among the first, maybe the first to shut down and really stop the movement as much as possible. He's kept essential businesses open. So we were able to get groceries and things, but I think that was important. It was shocking. It was shocking to everyone. Nobody saw it coming more than maybe a couple weeks from the time that it happened. But I remember family in Ohio, telling me, oh, you're governor, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, pick on him all you want, but I'm kind of happy he's taking a conservative position here with this virus because, we've seen in communities, and right now our communities in the purple tier, we have a high community transmission, and our hospitals have been full. My own mom had to recently go to the hospital, taken to the hospital by ambulance with stroke symptoms, and she had to stay in the ER. She didn't even know what year it was because she was just so mentally confused with this TIA she was experiencing, and she never got a hospital bed. She stayed in the ER all night long and into the next day until they could finally get her a CAT scan, and then they were able to send her home. But it was because the hospitals are full with COVID patients, and there were no beds for her in the stroke unit that night.
See, that's
nobody could be with her.
Yeah, it's sad, when you see, how things have transpired, especially since, it was this great democratic hoax that seems to have gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
I would also like to talk to you a little bit about the events of January 6th. One of not only do we now have a Capitol policeman laying in a rotunda for the first time, being murdered by the mob, we also had the first casualty, Miss Ashley Babbitt from right here in San Diego. But there's been hundreds of people that have been apprehended and charged with a lot of crimes. Are you surprised that no one has been charged in the death of this Capitol policeman or in responsibility for the woman that was also shot while invading the Capitol grounds?
Absolutely. I have been shocked at so many things over the course of Donald Trump's presidency. Every time I think it can't get any worse, it just kept getting worse. I mean, and then that happened, and I remember calling my dad and saying, well, I wish I had better news, but there's, they've taken Congress hostage. I mean, it was just insane. And yes, the slow response in prosecuting for the loss of life, in the people still in the Republican Party, the senators still, spineless. I have no other word. I don't even. It's reprehensible what people have gotten away with and continue to get away with. And I think the hammer's got to come down hard, or this is just a dress rehearsal.
It's kind of frightening words there. One of the things that have really conflicted me about this election and about things, how we have seen things turn, Uh, I expected a spineless Ted Cruz. We all knew what the the other senator was about, but we have open Q supporters in our Congress. And I have to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her being appointed to the Education Committee.
Unbelievable.
Here's a woman that doesn't believe in, or at least publicly, she doesn't believe in the Parkland shootings.
Right.
But after talking to, in the interview with the Parkland mother, the mother said that she admitted that, she's doing this for political purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think about? I mean, let's kids in basements, drinking of blood. I mean, this is 2021.
Yeah, it's like people are living in a fictional world that some evil person or group of people have made up, and it's like real life Dungeons and Dragons. it's bizarre. I talked to my mom the other day, and I told her, Mom, when I was younger, and we were all younger before the internet was the way that it is, and people would be in a cult. They would live together on a commune, and they would be brainwashed and believe their cult practices, whatever. But it was restricted to a rather small group of people that could gather in person. Whereas now that we have the internet, and they have literally been brainwashed 24/7 on the only outlets that they allow themselves to listen to, because they've been shut off to everything else. They're not supposed to believe anything they see or hear. They're not supposed to believe in mainstream media of any kind. It's just so dangerous, and that they've infiltrated our government, our military, perhaps. I know there were a number of Capitol of the not Capitol Police, but I can't think.
The insurgents, the rioters,
And they don't listen to any facts. There is no source that is reliable to them except their own group of groupies who have also been brainwashed. I was watching a video by Bill Nye the Science Guy and a few of his colleagues in science and mental health. And he was saying, and he made this video 3 years ago, but when you listen to it, it's like he made it for today. But he was saying that it takes approximately 2 years of a concerted effort to undo conspiracy theories in someone's head that who has been brainwashed with these things. And that's scary,
When you see the direction of the Republicans on some of our most vital issues, especially on the issue of COVID relief, and the amount of money that should be given to private citizens, just like the other stimulus checks. First of all, it would seem to me that if we had gotten on the ball with the first stimulus package, that we might not be in such bad shape as we are now.
Yeah.
And this goes to all communities, whatever color, creed, whatever. But it seems to me that we still have many diverse options, but we don't have a lot of groups talking together.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to that point? I mean, we've seen an insurrection that we haven't seen the Capitol invaded since the War of 1812. We haven't seen people actually come together and talk about the state of the country and what needs to be done to get us back on track, actually since the days of FDR.
Right.
What does this say about the state of our country? Even, what, 40, 50 years now after the Civil Rights Act?
Mm-hmm. It's sad. And I honestly don't know. I mean, we have to keep trying. We have to keep trying to find common ground on, I think, issue to issue. But it's so tough when people are placing their careers before the country. And that's what we have. That's a problem that we have. We need people in politics who will put country before career and people before themselves. And, I day to day in my conversations with people on social media and off, some days I'm really good and I'm really strong and I'm able to have the right words and put them the right way and they'll listen or they won't. Other times it's the attacking, it's the personal attacks that really, it seems like when you try to rationalize with them, they won't listen, and then they just start verbally attacking, and that makes it tough. But I have high hopes with Joe Biden. He's been known to be able to cross the aisle and get people to make some compromises. So I'm hopeful, but I honestly don't know. I think we just have to keep trying. I think we have to keep in mind it might take 2 years, but the trust is huge. And it's difficult to trust people right now. I mean, they're Republicans, but what kind of Republican are you? A lot of them have left the Republican Party very recently. A lot of them haven't. And a lot of them, voted for Trump even the second time, and yet, apparently didn't support what happened, but how do you determine who those people are? How do you trust those people? And how do you kind of undo the brainwashing that's been done to the QAnoners?
Not just QAnoners, but, I mean, I, as a black man, and I know it's very controversial, but if I have neighbors that have had Trump pimp signs in their yard, where's the trust?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm thankful that you were able to come on the show. One last question I want to ask you about, though, is the second impeachment of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought that this was a good idea because, number one, and this was most important to me, that he would never be able to hold public office again. I
Right.
didn't, that was the most important thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the second impeachment of 45?
I think it's important. I think that's part of the hammer coming down. I mean, there can't be people who have such high office who are above consequences and repercussions for behavior. Behavior matters. Words matter. And this is what we teach our kids. This is what I teach my students every day. And then we have this wild horse that's jumped, the fence over and over and over and over. And, this is not the message we want to send our children. We want them to see that good prevails, that we are punished for our poor behavior. And it has to start at the top, and it has to be a message that's sent so that, like I said before, this doesn't become a dress rehearsal for something in the future that may wind up being successful. This time, thankfully, it wasn't. But without the impeachment and the success of the impeachment and the punishment that will follow, and maybe other lawsuits will happen. I'm sure they are. There need to be consequences. So I'm for it. I'm all for it.
Well, as I said, thank you so much for coming and stepping in there. Kind of like a substitute teacher. I know I used to love it in school when the sub came in. you know,
Well, thank you for having me. And I saw your hat. I don't know you, but I just want to thank you for your service and God bless you.
well, thank you so much. It's even after 50 years, it's glad to be welcomed home.
Yeah.
We came home to a little different circumstances, but thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm very grateful for you.
And I would love to have you back on the show. I do have your information now, so you can look for me to email you at sometime, especially during these first 100 days of President Biden.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you. You have a great night.
You too.
That was Miss Jennifer Mashburn. Glad to have her on the show. And let's get back to Mr. Powers. Brother
back?
Powers, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, that was
you
very,
were,
very knowledgeable. I got to hear that.
yes, Miss Mashburn. She is a teacher, so I wanted to get the perspective of a teacher. Miss Kirkwood she was an attorney, and I was also. We'll get her back at a different time, but she mentioned a word that we in the Black community have heard a lot of, but we haven't been on the receiving end, or at least it seems that it's something that has been very misplaced. And I'm talking about the word trust. And once again, I come back to the experimentation, such as the Tuskegee, and I know that this is something that took place many years ago, but then you also talk about things that happened during the AIDS crisis. You talk about Ebola, and all of these things had root in mistrust of people of color. Trust is a two-edged sword to me. Such as when you talk about a bond of matrimony, you talk about going into a contract. There was a time when trust was a shake of the hand or a nod of the head, because people respected themselves and they honored their word. Have we gotten away from that?
Agree. Yes. Yes, that goes back to my comment before we cut away.
That was my intention. That's why I brought you back there. So, that's exactly. Go ahead.
Because the covenant was that we would all be one nation under Yah. There was only one name that we gave the Creator, and it was Yahweh. In the indigenous name, Yod He Vah He, there's YWH. I believe. I'm not sure. I'm lost. But Yahweh was the God of the people of the land here. And when there are those, even Andrew Jackson spoke and said in his later years that the Bible is the rock upon which this republic stands. Yes, he had slaves. But when men seem to get towards their last breath, they tend to repent.
Yeah,
I've in
I
my exercise of reading, that's what seems to be taking place. So, how do we get a country or a nation to return to the structure that was called the Great Experiment, which is to bring man to recognize the Creator as being the unique expression of the people? Um, and therefore, in that, we find the establishment of trust that I believe that your definition requires. Um, how do we do that? Well, we have regulations and statutes on the books that require um, the will to be enforced. So there has to be people who are competent to pick up those statutes and enforce them. You can lose your nationality doing what those individuals did on the 6th. To perpetrate, um, whether private or corporate or governmental, the genocide of a people, um, that's called murder. That's what it is. Whether it's premeditated, um, that's just the fulfillment of that definition. When you choose to overstep your bounds and dictate the life that the Creator has given, you become a collective party in the will to do evil. So um, we should be uncomfortable right now. As if you have any melanin in your skin, you should be uncomfortable right now. Very uncomfortable.
but here's the thing, Mr. Powers. I'm 73 years old. I've always been uncomfortable. There's never been a time when I was comfortable. So,
Right.
so I mean, I, I, my frustration is the fact that 50 years after the Civil Rights Act,
Mm-hmm.
I am still in the same position that I was beforehand. Now, it might not be as overt as it was back in the 60s or the 70s, but yet and still the same things that were promised uh, 50 years ago, I'm still asking for. Well, maybe I should put this. No, no, because we're still asking for the right to vote. To vote, we haven't demanded it, or else we would have it. We're still asking for equal opportunities in jobs, something that was supposed to be EEOC was, I was a young kid. I was 30 years old. I was in the prime of my life. We're still asking for equal opportunity. We're still asking for equal education. Where was where were we hiding under a bush somewhere these last 50 years? Were we,
No.
were we content with, I always say, and I've seen this coming up a lot, but this is phases that, the same phrases that we saw from Malcolm X, the same phrases that we saw from Huey Newton. We're still living off the scraps.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, again, you're dealing with competencies. People who are in positions of power have the competency that this is a white ordained government. What they don't know or what they refuse to accept is that the government was shown to them. They didn't have a clue on how to establish one. So they came to the people who were of the land and who were exercising government, who were practicing the principles of justice, and who were effective in their will to apply it and make it stick. So what we relish today and call nationalism and patriotism is nothing other than um, the expression of the people who lived upon the land. Uh, there's a lot of history behind that statement that takes us. The tentacles are wide and they're deep. I won't go into it, but we have the ability to understand today what the intent of this relationship was supposed to produce. And there for those 50 years, see, I was born in the 60s. I was born when they were just getting rid of the water fountains, black water fountains, white water fountains. I was aware of the green book, but yet it wasn't really exercised because there was some light coming through the blinds. Okay. The veils were starting to get pulled back. And we as a people were starting to aggressively move forward in this experiment, or they called it the Great Experiment. So, trying to create a vaccine for the common cold is kind of, throws up red flags for me because viruses are something that help protect us. And you cannot create a virus in a lab, institute it into the body, and expect guaranteed results, especially when you don't test it. And us having gone through the Tuskegee Airmen experiments, the Mrs. Lack and her genome being extracted to cure others. I forgot her first name. I'm sorry. I'm a little late here, but we'll keep moving. But I think you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yes, I definitely know who you're talking about. Yes. I think of I'm like you. I think her first name may be Susan, but I'm not sure. But you can go ahead there with your thought.
Okay. I did some digging after I saw January the 6th. After I saw that event, I did some digging, and I came up with the statute, and it's 8 U.S. Code Statute 1481. Loss of nationality by native born or nationalized citizen, but voluntary action, burden of proof, presumptions. And it states a person who is a natural of the United States, whether by birth or naturalization, shall lose his nationality by voluntarily performing any of the following acts with the intention of relinquishing United States nationality. One of them is committing any act of treason against or attempting to force to overthrow or bearing arms against the United States, violating or conspiring to violate any of the provisions of Section 2383 of Title 18, or willfully performing any act in violation of Section 2385 of Title 18, or violating Section 2384 of Title 18 by engaging in a conspiracy to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, if and when he is convicted thereof by a court martial or by a court of competent jurisdiction. So there are a lot of people who have conspired to overthrow, to put down, to destroy by force the government of the United States. Anybody who entered into that building and disrupted the count of the people by the people, those were insurrectionists, and those people should lose their nationality. I didn't say it. The statute says it because the people who wrote the statute understood who they were living with, who they were living amongst. That's another show. But the, the statute portion of it, that I found it, and I'm going to stand on that. And I'm looking for competent jurisdiction to enforce it.
Well, I have one last question for you, and this was something that I heard in a discussion here in within my neighborhood, and the question, well, actually, it's more of, I guess, a statement. But what do you think about the effect of equality in relation to opportunity within communities of color?
Okay. The quality opportunity. Um, I don't know if grants would be the correct response to that. Petitioning the government via grants to establish the quality of the opportunity that you're looking for. Being able to put that in writing and then establishing it in your jurisdiction, whether it be California or Ohio. However, I only believe they give so many grants. I'm not sure how that would function on the large scale because you're dealing with ADOS, the descendants of slaves, African descendants of slaves, and you're dealing with the indigenous people who were redefined as Indians. You're dealing with the immigrants who don't fall into the category of the first two, whether it be from Ireland or the Middle East or from the East, Asia. So you have a lot of balls to juggle. And and if I could redirect this towards the office of the presidency and its sitting occupant right now, I don't see him juggling those balls. I don't see the equality coming to our community, even though our meager vote was used to establish him in such a position.
I know. I ask some hard questions sometime. I know it's um,
I think there are venues for that question to be answered more properly than what I have with my common knowledge of. I personally have two businesses that I haven't been able to get off the ground because I just don't trust the establishment um, to do right by me when it comes to me doing the work. Well, I did the work. I just can't afford equipment. So personal experience has put my business off to the side. It's on the curb right now because I can't take off. There's no way I will surrender my business through bankruptcy to a government that oppresses me. That's very difficult for me to swallow. And so I keep my ideas in house. I don't share it with everybody, which this experiment was supposed to establish. Oh, I got something that everybody can use. But I can't go into business with a corrupt institution and then call myself legitimate. That just doesn't bear well with me. So I'll die with my business plans. I'll die with my ideas. I will not give it to the patent office. Heck no. And then they take it and they throw it overseas, and then they build it overseas, and then they reject your patent, and then they say, well, they had it first, and I don't want to deal with that back and forth. I mean, that's not competition to me. That's rigging the system. So I'm still alive. I wake up every morning, not by my own strength. Believe me, it's not by my own strength. So I hope, my hope is that we're able to establish a better union after what happened on January 6th.
Hence the name of the show, To an Imperfect Union. Thank you so much, Mr. Powers, for coming on tonight. I appreciate your time. You don't have to leave. I'm going to have the local chapter of the Black Panthers, Mr. Robert Ward Williams, along with the founder, Mr. Aaron. Excuse me, I did forget his name. But this is our usual ending, ending to the show, the representation of the people with Brother Williams. So you want to give us any final thoughts before I bring Brother Williams on, Mr. Powers?
No, the pleasure was all mine, James, and keep me in mind as we move along down this road.
I definitely will, and I thank you for your time and your insight. Always a pleasure.
Very good.
Brother Williams, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. You got my brother Aaron on?
I saw him in the queue earlier, but he left and I haven't seen him back. I'm not sure. You might want to send him a message, let him know that we're in. I think this is him now, Brother Aaron. Let's see if we can get him in. Brother, before we get I know you have some topics that you wanted to talk about, but I wanted to ask you about that phrase that I was just talking to Brother Powers about, and that's the effect of equality in relation to opportunity. How do you find that within the Black community?
Well, I like that layout. So the deal is the way I look at that is obviously when you look at the American dream in general, there's always opportunity. So from that standpoint, opportunity is what made this country, built this country, so to speak. You know, going back to the European founders, as well as the fact that the American way of life and the way the Constitution is, and just the way we are in general in regards to the structure of the United States, there's always this opportunity that we have. The opportunity also oftentimes can be, you know, a carrot that's right before you that you can grab. It can be a baton, or it can be something that moves as you move. So the idea here is that, yes, the United States is a land of opportunity. Within the Black community, there's potentially opportunity. But the problem we run into, obviously, is the equal access to those opportunities, because oftentimes opportunities come through lenses of racism. And by coming through lenses of racism, you can see opportunities, but they're not tangible to you. You can't just actually reach out, grab it, and take hold of it and take advantage of the quote unquote opportunities, which is why we actually had to have a legislation that deals with the access to those particular opportunities. You know, dealing with minority contracts and things of that nature, and you know, programs that give you know, the quote unquote Black people or minorities or an opportunity. access to those opportunities. So equality and opportunity do not go hand in hand. Opportunity is something that gives you a sense of hope and a sense of pride that it is possible. And as well as a lot of times it plays into your educational background, it plays into your upbringing, it plays into your perception of how you view the world. Because oftentimes people, you know, in impoverished conditions, they don't view the world from an optimistic perspective. And so therefore, often they play the victimization role, and that obviously will diminish your ability to recognize opportunities. See, an opportunity has to be recognized first and foremost. And a lot of times that goes right into, again, your upbringing. So if we don't even recognize an opportunity, then it's invisible. And if it's invisible, then I'm going to fall back on my perception of racism, which is going to fall back on my concept of equality. And then it just kind of cascades downhill from there. So I believe that obviously there is great opportunity in the United States. I'd be a fool to try to say otherwise. But at the same time, you know, what we're dealing with, especially this modern day time, systemic and systematic racism is exposing us more so to the fact that, let me say not us, because we've been knowing, but it's exposing the mainstream more so to the fact that the equal access to that opportunity has not been there, and that racism has made sure that it stays right beyond your reach for the masses. And so, you know, we just want to fight that. We want to fight to get equal access to opportunity. That's my answer.
Also, before we get into the program, I saw the young brother on YouTube the other day, and you promised to give us an update on what was happening with the family. And could you kind of update what's going on there? Has there been any type of investigation?
Yeah, I talked with Brother Tariq today, and unfortunately, they're not making the headway that we would like to make. He would like to make, and so I actually am planning a meeting with him this week here to try to see what the San Diego Black Panther Party can potentially do to help out. And I admit that we have not personally been involved in the movement. He has told me that he reached out to Black Lives Matter and they're helping him as a national organization, but there hasn't been quite the move that's been real beneficial in his eyes to the local organizations that are helping out with the case. And kind of like I told you before earlier, unfortunately, sometimes these things, you know, don't get the attention that they need. And so I am going to see to it that we lend our hand and see what we can do as an organization to help out. Obviously, the Black Panther Party here in San Diego does not have the deep pockets of the NAACP, which is the organization he belongs to. But nonetheless, I'm sure that's something that we can contribute to help bring recognition to the situation and possibly put it in a position of justice. So.
Enough for me. I'm still waiting for Brother Aaron to come on. He was here a moment ago, but you can.
Let me see if I can reach him real quick. Just a second.
No problem. I
saw it come on and then drop out.
Yeah. He might not could have heard us or something.
Okay. Yeah, you tried. You gonna jump in? Yeah,
I mean, I think it won't connect for some weird reason.
I see you come on and then you drop right out.
Yeah, so
try a different browser.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm in a different browser right now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, hopefully it'll.
Okay. All right. I just keep going until he gets on. So.
Okay.
Aaron, by the way, is the reason why I thought this would be an important, a good meeting is because he's the founder of the New Black Panther Party. And I know I think you've had members of the New Black Panther Party on in the past. And so I did want to give you opportunity to speak with the founder and see if you had any specific questions for him, especially in regards to the internal or the operation of how, you know, the Panther Party got established grew through the younger generation, and some of the same consistencies or parallels that we see, today in 2021, in reference to what took place when the Panther Party was picked up by the younger generation when it was formed under the new Black Panther Party.
I see that there's a movie out concerning the lives of one of the founders of the Black Panther Party.
Oh yeah.
There are some controversial parts in the background that I think that they drew. I'm not sure, where. I think there's a combination of fiction involved here in order to make it a story.
Right.
What were your thoughts when you saw the portrayal, or
Well,
if you've seen it, or a trailer, or
yeah, I've seen the trailer, and I actually like the trailer simply because anytime a movie is produced that'll help expose people, again, obviously only looking at the trailer, there's not that much, that I can go off of, but the little bit that I saw, I think hopefully there's an opportunity that will ignite people's interest in actually reading and learning about the reality of what happened with Fred Hampton Jr., as well as expose people to the idea of the infiltration that takes place, that still to this day takes place within our grassroots movements and organizations, as well as just how the injustice they did to him in terms of assassinating him. The one thing that I find very important about the approach with Fred Hampton that you don't get enough recognition on the West Coast, unfortunately, in terms of the Panther chapters that exist outside of the West Coast, is that Fred Hampton was very, very instrumental in being able to galvanize people regardless of their background, of being, European and ethnic class and racial class and economic class, whatever. Fred was able to pull all people around, and that was the whole concept of the Rainbow Coalition. And so from that standpoint, he, in my opinion, was one of the very few members of the organization that had that type of charisma and had that type of drive and that ability to naturally bring people together. And that unification that he sought is the reason why they took him out. He was that important to the movement, and he was that important to just unification across the board as it applies to all power to the people. And so they did not. The last thing that the government wanted at that time was a young Black man that was able to galvanize across racial barriers to that degree. And so they assassinated him. And I'm hoping that this movie portrayal of that situation will show and expose the people to the brutality that took place, and open people's eyes, get them to study, get them to want to come aboard, want to be involved in the movement, whether it be through the Black Panther Party or through any other force. I just, like the idea of people being more involved. So right now, I'm real optimistic about the movie. Obviously, like you said, and like with other movies, they do a lot of sensationalism in order to create a nice movie. But again, even with that, there's an opportunity for people to want to be curious enough to read the reality and the real facts of the situation and dig into it and come right on in. And so that's my take on that.
I was also talking to Mr. Powers earlier about what I call the innate fear of people of color. Is this something that, I mean, in the Black community, we address it, as the talk that you give to your kids, our racial history with the people that are supposed to enforce the laws. But I still think that, you things that you don't understand and things that are different people tend to fear. And this is especially true to me when it comes to people of color. And curiously, where it used to be almost defined by black men, now it doesn't matter whether you're a black man or woman, you're still considered that threat.
Hmm.
Can you address that?
Yeah, I would address that by basically talking about just think about the propaganda that takes place when this so-called threat comes into perception. You know, the whole thing with that perception is it's been portrayed that, you know, the black man and the black woman are to be feared. The black man and the black woman are strong, powerful, big. You know, and it even goes into the subconsciousness of how they portray blackness in general. You know, and you can date this all the way back to when the fact that they refer to devil's food cake as you know, which is chocolate, and angel food cake white, and all these subliminal messages that automatically align a person to fear the black person. And then just our culture in general, we're, you know, we tend to be animated. And so from that standpoint, when you play off of that, then people have this inherited handed down fear of us, to the point to where, you know, it causes cops to be trigger happy. It causes them to think that, you know, that we are detrimental and put their lives in danger. um you know, and to me it's just a stereotype that has grown its own pair of legs and became this crazy monster. And I think it was intentional, but it became this crazy monster that causes people to just naturally fear us because they don't know us. But you know, to me it's hype, is all it is. It's hype, and it's a justification for a lot of the other abuses that take place and oppression that takes place. Because when you deal with the downtrodden, and you deal with the people that are at the bottom, of course there's going to be a sense of anger and a sense of pain that goes along with being on the bottom. And when you allow that to be amplified the way they do on the media and the way they intentionally do to create sensationalism, then obviously we're going to appear to be this monster. And so I just feel like that's just propaganda, and that's propaganda that's used to paint a negative picture upon us. And just like with any propaganda, you'll spend more time trying to fight the negative propaganda than you will being able to address the reality and the truths of the situation. And so that's one of the things that I look at when I see that. I mean, I think that's just a tactic. You know, whether we talking about the FBI, the Department of Defense, or any other intelligence communities, I think it was just part of systemic racism that created that monster that they try to force us to live up to, so that it can be justified to take us out in terms of fearing for their life.
Um, well, Mr. Brother Aaron seems to be having some trouble getting in and out here. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but you can carry on. I'll try not to interrupt you too many more times.
All right. Well, my main thing was to have him on the show to just kind of go over some of those dynamics, but I kind of get into a little bit of it. The thing is when I look at the, you know, like even when you talk about that movie that's coming out, we're talking about the modern day version of the Black Panther and the semblance in which it took on versus that of the Panther that most people, you know, from a nostalgic perspective got in the 60s. So we are in a different age and a different time. Now most of our people operate through social media, for better or for worse. And so as a Panther, we have to also adopt some of the measures in which we can use to communicate to the general public. But at the same time, what we can't do is lose our sense of identity in terms of what it means to be a Panther, and our sense of identity in terms of what it means to put boots on the ground and actually do the work in the community. And that's one of the things I did hate, obviously, about the whole COVID situations, that it did shut down a lot of certain levels of being up close and personal. but we have to adapt, and overcome. And so my spirit is about adapting and overcoming, and being optimistic as possible as it applies to moving forward with this movement. Just so from that standpoint, the new and modern day Panther basically has to be a little bit more innovative in terms of how we identify with the community. Because again, talking about that, the propaganda that's put out there, the social media footprint that's out there, and the sensationalism that's out there, people have a warped perception of what it means to be a Panther. And like I tell people all the time, just for instance, when we do our recruitment, and the very first class that a person goes through to be a Panther is about critical thinking. That is the first subject matter that we touch on, learning to be a critical thinker. Because if you're not a critical thinker, you cannot identify and separate the actual problems from issues. And it even kind of goes back to the question you asked earlier about dealing with, opportunities versus equality. If our critical thinking has been impaired throughout our entire life, then we tend to muddle and waddle around in our oppression to the point to where it creates an inability for us to just want to rise up, an inability for us to want to come to the table for a solution. And so even when you deal with a lot of people on the protest line, so to speak, a lot of times what you're getting is expelling of anger, frustration, in how do we fight this, and how can this be this justice stop. So critical thinking comes into play, and you have to be able to take a step back and look at the conditions and look at ways to address the issues to the point to where we're not always approaching something with a band-aid, but that we're able to actually bring forth and identify the direct problems so that we can have direct solutions. Now, these obviously take long, may take periods of time. So with any victory, the idea here is that we have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to be willing to just commit your full life to this. This is even why, like, for instance, Huey P. Newton referred to revolutionary suicide from the stance of saying that either you're going to stand for something or fall for anything. So in addressing revolutionary suicide, it's about making sure that we recognize that we have to give our life to the struggle. That doesn't mean that you set yourself up to be assassinated, because that's not the case. But what we're talking about is living for the people, living for the fact that it is not going to be an easy victory. It may not necessarily even be something you see in your lifetime when you talk about dealing with certain levels of liberation. But what we have to do is work toward outpacing the pace of oppression. And that is the bottom line. It is getting up every day knowing that we want to fight the good fight and move our people forward in a progressive direction, and not embellish ourselves in negativity. Brother Aaron, are you there? Can you hear us? I see your name, but I don't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. So until we get a signal from Aaron, basically, so from that stance, the idea again is to raise up a new generation, deal with the continuity of the Panther, and move that younger generation forward. One of the biggest things that we face, obviously, with just the modern day version, the downfall of COINTELPRO, and even talking about this Domestic Terror Prevention Act of 2021 that they're putting out. I'm real concerned just in terms of the power, the power that the intelligence community is now reaching out for. So from that stance, dealing with the power of the intelligence community, when I look at what happened, through COINTELPRO in the mid 50s and 60s and 70s, what I'm seeing now is that the intelligence community is utilizing this quote unquote insurrection to be able to ask for certain higher levels of domestic powers. And through these higher levels of domestic powers is going to basically work toward granting them the level of power that they wanted and implemented illegally through COINTELPRO. So, I'm an advocate for for freedom of speech, even if it is, the bigots and the racists that are speaking, because I recognize the fact that even with all of this that is going on, remember that up until that insurrection, the FBI considered Black identity to be the most detrimental thing to the United States. And I tell people all the time, just break down the words in which it was posed. Black identity extremism. What does it mean to be Black and to be having an extreme identity? That basically tells me that we are the greatest threat as Black people simply because we create and we carry our identity to the level that we recognize the strengths in being Black. We recognize the strengths of being melanated. So why is it to me that because you identify with being Black and you want to be extreme about your representation of Black, does that pose you to be the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States? You cannot really identify any point in time to where, as a people, Black people has risen up to the point to where we should ever have been considered the most public enemy number one. Even when you look at the Black Panther Party, at the height of the Black Panther Party, when it was the greatest threat to the quote unquote internal security of the United States, is when it was implementing the breakfast program and the feeding program. It had nothing to do with guns. And see, that goes right back into that personification and that perception that false identity that they throw out there. See, that's what we're talking about now, false identities. Because it was not the weapon that made the Panthers great. It was the fact that we were uniting the community. It's the same thing that goes into that movie you was talking about with Fred Hampton. What made him powerful was his ability to unite the people, his ability to get folks to recognize that if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. So from that stance, he was getting everybody to look at themselves in the mirror and recognize racism for what it is. And the approach to doing that is you obviously want to get the Europeans to see the error in their ways, to recognize the fact that they've lived off of the beneficial. They've been a beneficiary of racism, a beneficiary of slavery, a beneficiary of free labor. And so that whole trend continues and that whole benefit continues until you yourself become a part of the solution. And it's statements like that and it's information like that that galvanized the people to the point to where the government saw him to be a great threat. So again, the Panther Party was a humongous threat to the internal security because it was unifying the people. It was providing education for the youth that was beyond the curriculum-based education that only identifies with what it takes to get a good job, but not actually putting something in the kids' head that deal with them in terms of their identity and help them deal with something to be proud of in terms of being Black or brown. So the Black Panther Party, as well as Black identity extremism, is really all about dealing with your Black identity. So having a Black identity and identifying with your roots makes you a threat. And so we really need to take a look at that and see that for what it is, which goes right back to systemic racism. And there's no reason why our identity, here we go into this quote unquote month of Black history, should ever be something that we should feel intimidated by just wanting to express. And so they want a muted down, watered down version, domesticated version of a human being. That is the kind that goes to the birth to prison pipeline, from childbirth to prison. So that's what their, the end game is to continue to keep us on a path of being consumers instead of producers. And from that standpoint, you can continue to use up the Black people. And we just have to fight against that. So fighting against that means waking our people up, getting our people to come out of that level of victimization that has gripped us, for centuries now. And as we rise up and become self-sufficient as a people and self-sufficient as our identity, then, here we go facing some of the same stipulations, because it would obviously change the dynamics of the way this country is capable of operating. And there are certain people that just would not like to part ways with their excess in resources and revenue.
Are you surprised? Well, are you surprised that the Proud Boys? Uh, to me, now these are mostly Latinos, so these are people of color. Yet they seem to be accepted, or at least they were accepted by the mainstream until they were found to be a part of the insurrectionists that attacked the Capitol. But yet and still, they were not attacked with the same fervor as the leader of uh, the black militia. Uh, what what do you think when you look at the way these two groups are handled, even though they are both of color? What do you think about Uh, are they given false hopes? Should we consider them the well, hey, for lack of any other word, the Uncle Toms of our armed society? When you take up uh, I mean, it's not that we haven't seen it. I mean, we've seen mercenaries of many colors. We've seen whites deploy Native Americans against each other. So this is not really something that is new. That they've used tokens as pawns, but what do you think when you see the way even these people are treated as opposed to the way demonstrators of Black Lives Matter?
Well, I would say that, to me, you kind of hit it right on the nail when you said they're being used as pawns. And I think from that standpoint, the Proud Boys has been heavily infiltrated. And by being heavily infiltrated, I think a lot of the maneuvers that have taken place from the Proud Boys have been a direct result of CIA and FBI involvement. And I would go as far as to say that here in San Diego, the encounters that I personally had encounters with the Proud Boys at protests. One of the ones that pop into my mind the most is when we was assisting the Brown Berets right there in Chicano Park. Okay, so here go a park, called Chicano Park, right? But it's addressing the Latino community from the stance of recognizing the richness of the culture that is mostly pre-Spaniard. Okay, and see now you go into a whole different dynamic to where some people of that descent recognize their native roots, whereas others pick up on the European Spaniard side. So even within that community, in dealing with the quote unquote Mexican community, there is, a lot of diverse perspectives on what they are. And so here we go, the Proud Boys, which the Proud Boys that we ran across was all white, by the way. And most of them came out of Santee in Lakeside. So the ones we encountered here in San Diego were all white. And their whole objective was to try to get Chicano Park shut down, as well as they were trying to, damage some of the mules and, do graffiti and just destroy stuff. So, we assisted the Brown Berets in dealing with perimeter security and seeing to it that they don't go into their neighborhood. So here go the Proud Boys basically coming into the Chicano neighborhood with no other intent other than to create disruption. And you don't get situations like that to where you get black and brown people going into white neighborhoods to be disruptive. So why is it that we have to deal with them coming into our communities? Another example of that, going back into the early advent years of the new Black Panther Party, when I was with that formation, is that when we dealt with an incident in a place called Jasper, Texas, where you had a brother by the name of James Byrd Jr. who got decapitated because his body, they tied a chain actually around his neck and drug him to the point to where his head actually came apart from the rest of his body. Now, the new Black Panther Party got involved in that incident because the Ku Klux Klan actually came out and decided that they were going to march You hear me? They were going to literally have a march through the Black community to bolster the fact that they had one of their own stand up and was willing to. It was 3 of them actually stand
Right,
up and was
right.
willing to give their lives to make a statement in regards to white supremacy. So that statement of white supremacy extended to the fact that they were going to literally march through the Black community and bolster by killing us. You don't find acts like this happening with Black people. We just don't think that evil and that crazy. But yet we're considered to be the public enemy #1 and the greatest threat to internal security of the United States. It just don't add up. It does not make any sense, and I can't even begin to comprehend the mentality behind that. It's just pure racism, and that's all it is. You can't call it anything else when you see consistent acts of this happen. When you talk about, I would say, what 95% of the school shootings, mass school shootings, we talking about white folks again. Black people is just not in our nature to be that violent at all. Yeah, we will speak from a level of pain and express ourselves in a certain way, but typically what ends up happening behind that is, especially with the fact that we're living in impoverished conditions, and we take it out on each other. And that's that victimization that I'm working toward, making sure we address and fight against. Is that we continually prey upon ourselves through the conditions of oppression. But from that same standpoint, it just doesn't make sense that we continue to fall for these same set of circumstances, and you see 2 entirely different ways in which they're handled. Now, even like I was saying, looking at this Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, there's a lot of verbiage in that to where they're specifically saying that they're addressing white supremacy, this, white supremacy, that. And my experience, period, as it applies to dealing with the intelligence community, is that I know that their precursor and their examples in the way that they would go about enforcing anything is going to be based on the experience that they have in attacking the Black community. So even with the verbiage that they have in there, my attitude is I don't believe it until it happens. And not only that, it also, again, will leave room and leave opportunity for them to come down on organizations like the Black Panther Party, again, with us being out in the community, feeding the people, being out in the community, handing out sanitation packets. I mean, the thing is we become a threat simply because our philosophy is dealing with self-determination, simply because we want a change in the system. And any change can be viewed as a threat to the security of the United States. And all it takes is for them to create, basically what's called a provocateur, which, like going back to that movie that we talked about, you will see that going down. When they throw a provocateur into the mix, then from that stance, you take this one individual and you get them to do a horrendous act, and the whole organization gets blamed on it. And so we know that that's just a playbook tactic that's being used. And it is examples like that continue to be amplified and portrayed on the media, the extreme examples of extreme. And those extreme examples of extreme end up being a poster childs to have them come down upon our movements. And we know better.
You said something a minute ago that kind of riled me up, because I'm not a victim. I am the end result of a warrior nation. To consider myself a victim, to me, would be a total waste of my efforts and my life achievements. So for me to consider myself a victim, I've already lost the war.
Yep.
Along with the battle.
Right.
So how do I get? How do I get out of this rut of victimization. How do I get this label off of me and mine? I mean, sure, we are, we have suffered injustices, but in order for a victim accepts those injustices, he doesn't do anything about them. He doesn't have any perception of justice. And is this the mentality of blacks? I mean, this was something that in the 60s and 70s we attributed to Negroes.
Yeah.
And this is why we considered that a term of degradation. It was a polite way of calling me a nigger.
Right.
It's 2021. I mean, have I lost something in the interpretation?
I don't think you necessarily lost something in interpretation, but what you have to understand with that is that we can kind of just go right into dealing with the aspect of the culture of rap and hip hop. Remember that it was utilized, that avenue of entertainment was utilized to help insinuate and prop up the concept and the terminology of nigga and made it a popular thing to say. And so certain levels of ignorance was given a front seat. And by that being given a front seat, and by a lot of the surface level subject matter that's been given a front seat, it just basically goes right back into feeding into the system in terms of making sure that the youth identify with being a consumer. This is why you have an over exaggerated aspect of music that gets into what I own or what I can buy and what I can portray and how I look. All of these things address the individual from the stance of dealing with things at a level because of being a dysfunctional human being. You want to have this face, this front face that is portrayed that you're greater than what you are. You want to be able to spend money to the point to where you don't deal with accountable spending. It basically has us embellishing in bad I would just say bad, bad and dysfunctional ways of living. And this stuff has, poisoned, I would say poisoned the youth. So when you deal with that type of poison that's being promoted, and mind you, that's being promoted and pushed upon our people to the point to where it's even, then obviously it seeped over, which everything typically does, seep over into the white community. And now they start embracing certain levels of that foolishness. But from that standpoint, this, the terminology of Negro to nigga has become a hip thing to be and a hip thing to do. Sagging your pants, it's a lot of negative stuff that goes along with that. And as a result, you have a generation and generations of children that have lost their identity and lost their way to the concept of being black and being proud, and lost their identity to true culture of the hip hop industry, like someone that like KRS-One promotes and constantly pushes out there, or an Immortal Technique or a Dead Prez. But this kind of stuff is falls upon deaf ears because the industry is all about pushing poison. So from that stance, we don't have enough people like Professor Griff out there on the that is countering that scenario. And there's a big disconnect between a lot of the youth as it applies to recognizing their greatness. And so from that standpoint, that's why I said the perception of victimization. It causes the people to have this perception that they are a victim. And when you have a perception of being a victim, like you said, you lose the war and lose the battle, because you have a low self-esteem, you have low self-worth, low self-value. And so then you seek your value and your self-worth based upon what kind of things that you can either purchase or pretend that you own. Or even from the social media standpoint, it goes into creating this facade in terms of, you know, your virtual identity, to make your virtual identity look like you always enjoying yourself, you always being, you know, in a loving and happy environment. So people basically try to live up to their avatars from that standpoint. And again, that adds to a certain level of sickness, which goes right back down to a person really, when it boils down to it, being a victim of their surroundings and their environment. You know, in the Panther training, we have one of the things that we refer to as an acronym we call TOYS, which basically means tools of your surroundings. And when you're dealing with tools of your surroundings, either you learn to utilize your surroundings or your resources to your benefit. And if you don't, then you can expect your oppressor will use it to their benefit. And oftentimes we find ourselves being considered a resource. And as long as we don't consider ourselves valuable, then someone else will. And from that stance, what you get into now is you get into the those that control your time. By them controlling your time, it matters not where you are, you know, in terms of your actual place, because they control your time, they control your perception, they control your reality, and that keeps people locked into a lower level of what we refer to as linear habitual thinking. So one of the things that we always say with, you know, even within our platform, is that we have to have a knowledge of self. Dealing with a knowledge of self and knowing who you are and what you are, then you'll know how to separate yourself from your enemy. But if you don't know who you are, there's no way for you to know what your enemy is. And when I say your enemy, I'm not just talking about a person, so to speak. I'm not giving it a personification. Typically, our enemy ends up being how we treat ourselves. And our enemy ends up being looking in the mirror and not knowing what the hell I am when I look in the mirror. So oftentimes we have to take it back home and get our people to recognize that they have to change the dynamic. We have to change our perspective. We have to control our perspective. Within the Panther Party, we refer to it as the 3Ds. Define yourself, develop yourself, and then be able to defend what you define and developed. So from that standpoint, that is the path, the correct path that we must be on. And it's not an easy path. It means that you have to hold yourself accountable to advancing who you are and what you are and your place in the world. And so we have to, you know, work on pulling our people out of certain levels of laziness that have gone along with, you know, allowing yourself to be played as a consumer and a victim.
Very interesting. I'm very sorry that we couldn't get Brother Aaron on tonight, but I hope we can get him on next week, because I do have some basic questions about the philosophy of the new Black Panther Party. And I'm sure you could answer it, but I would like to have Brother Aaron on
Right.
maybe next week.
Okay.
You could give me his email, and I'll send it directly to him.
Okay, I do that.
That might work out a little better. But
Okay.
I always try to give you the proper platform, no matter what how much time it takes. So why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening, and I look forward to talking to you again next Monday.
Okay, well, my final thoughts is I just want the people to, again, raise their level of consciousness. To me, it's all about addressing things from what we refer to within the Panther Party as the trifactor. Trifactor is the individual, the family, and the community. Those three things must be addressed simultaneously and cohesively, which means that we address this, what we call a holistic perspective. There is no difference between the three. All of them have to be part of the unit. And so when we talk about that, we have to reshape our value system as Black people and recognize that when we say family, we mean the community. Family cannot just simply be your blood relatives that live under your roof in your household. But remember, the African way of life in our culture is about the tribe, is about having the entire community operate and oversee your development as a youth and as you raise yourselves up. And we have to go back to those type of mentalities and back to those ways of life and ways of viewing the family structure. And when we do view this family structure as community, then it would give us the proper perspective to be able to address power to the people. And when we address power to the people, then we'll start being able to actually see with our own eyes the power that has been already there all along, that gives us the ability to make great moves, gives us the ability to synchronize as a people, gives us the ability to be able to go beyond what I call the 6th grade linear thinking level and open ourselves up to high levels of intelligence, high levels of awareness, and high levels of development, and move forward from that perspective. So I just want to leave that on the minds of the people, is to constantly grow, always, do your part to become a better person and a better family and a better community. All power to the people.
Thank you so much, Brother Williams, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
Yes, sir.
I hope everyone has enjoyed the time that we have spent discussing issues that I think are very important, not only just within the community, but within the Black community, within the realm of human beings, not Republicans and Democrats. I think one of the things, I think we have lost our humanity as well as our sense of purpose. And I try to use this program to show that we can all have a part in this society. And as I said, if you feel that you're a victim, that's your fault. I'm not going to let you put that on anyone but yourself, because it may not be the land of opportunity for everyone, but it is an equal land. We can all learn. That's the one thing we can all learn, and sometimes you have to be self-taught. You can't depend upon someone to come and take your hand and lead you down a path that they want. Be independent. Learn to think for yourself. And with that, I will see you next week. Have a great night, everyone. All power to the people, brother.